Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Patch 14.1 has just been released, and with it has come a huge amount of changes to open up the meta. So today we're going to go through the top 5 comps to climb ranked and how to play them at each stage of the game. Let's get into it. First up is the comp I'm most excited about. This was already an A tier comp and fairly underrated in the previous meta, but it's now received not just one buff, but a total of 5 buffs across the traits and units it uses. 8-bit itself has been buffed, with the biggest increase at 4 8-bit, which this comp uses. Then the majority of the units it uses have also been buffed, such as Garen, Kayle, Maud and Viego. I'm going to be very shocked if this comp doesn't become one of the most popular reroll comps in this patch. Augment suggestions for this comp are any reroll or strong survivability augments. Riven can be quite tanky as she has a shield built into her kit, but any combat augments you can find will really help. March of Progress is also a great choice if you see it, as it allows you to slow roll for Riven at level 7 while still leveling up. Itemization for Riven should be focusing on QSS, Titans, and any healing items such as BT or Hodge. The second unit you should try to itemize is either Viego with any additional combat items or Garen and Maud with any tank items. Try to prioritize an armor shred item such as Even Shroud for one of your tanks, and put them near Riven to ensure the units she's attacking have their armor shredded. For the early game, look out for any 8-bit starts to start stacking the 8-bit high score as soon as possible. Corki has received a slight nerf, so he's not as strong as he was last patch at being an item holder for AD items, but the benefit you get from stacking the 8-bit high score early on is worth it. The other options for starts are any of the strong melee 1-cost units such as Yasuo or possibly Vi, and also Olaf. You want to be leveling to 7 as fast as possible whilst preserving your econ and health. Once you hit level 7 you want to sell your current headliner and look at doing a slight roll down to look for a Riven headliner. Once you find that Riven headliner, depending on the version it is, you want to either activate 5 edgelord or 4 8-bit, and from there you econ back up to 50 and slow roll any excess gold to 3-star her. Once you hit 3-star Riven, you want to level to 8 and put in both 5 edgelord and 4 8-bit to cap out your board. If you manage to find an 8-bit emblem on the carousel or a tome, then you can look at going for 6 8-bit by dropping down to 3 edgelord, or you can simply drop Caitlyn for a strong utility frontline like Alawi or Yorick. You can pivot from this comp by skipping slow rolling for 3-star Riven and instead go 8 and play around Pentakill with Viego as your main carry.
So many souls await.
Before we get into this next comp, if you do find these guys helpful, I'd really appreciate you liking and subscribing, as it really helps support the channel and we're so close to 500 subscribers. So with that out of the way, this comp was very strong when set 10 was first released, then fell off in favour of the Jazz meta, and it's been underplayed ever since. With buffs to Karthus, Executioners, and a couple of other Pentakill units, this comp is definitely back to the former glory it once had at the start of the set. This comp is very flexible with the headliner. Ideally you want to get any version of the Karthus headliner or any Pentakill headliner. Depending on the headliner you get, you can either go for 7 Pentakill or 5 Pentakill and 4 Executioner. Both should be very strong and consistent in getting top 4s. For augments, there isn't any in particular that are a must pick for this comp, but I'd be looking for anything that helps gain mana such as Infusion, or any that buys time for Karthus to ult, such as Cybernetic Bulk and Unified Resistance. Healing Orbs is also a standout augment in this comp, as Karthus is great at picking off weak units which will trigger the augment. For itemization, you want Karthus to have a Shojin as a mandatory item, then flex any AP items such as JG and Archangels. With this patch, Karthus now hits 1 less unit with his ult, but does a lot more damage, so kitting him out with as much damage as possible will be the key to victory with this comp. Your secondary unit to itemize will be whichever tank you 2-star first. In most cases this will be Maud, but in some cases it might be a Mumu. In the early game, look for any AP item holders such as Annie or Nami with Spellweaver and Disco, or simply go for a Pentakill start and flex in any AP item holder you can. If you get a Shojin start right off the bat, you can look at going for an AD unit with a good ability like Corki or Senna. Going into the mid game, you want to look at building your Pentakill board ready for your roll down at level 8 for your final board. If you find any Heartsteel units, you can slot in 3 Heartsteel for some extra loot whilst you're leveling, and use Sappheiros as your item holder. He's not the best item holder for Karthus, but the additional Heartsteel loot makes the weaker board worth it. Once you hit level 8, you want to sell your current headliner if it's not Pentakill Maud, and look at rolling down for a Karthus headliner. You should be stable once you either hit that or hit a 1-star Karthus and 2-star everything else. Once you're stable, you can look at going to level 9 to cap out your board with Yorick 2. Pivoting from this comp is fairly simple, as the Karthus items work well on 2 other fairly strong comps this patch, which is either Spellweaver Ahri or Disco TF. I prefer the Spellweaver Ahri comp out of the 2.
A clever fox is never caught.
Next up we have the classic Ahri comp before Sentinel Ahri became the meta. Although Ahri received a slight attack speed nerf, there are a few item buffs which we'll go through, which means that she will still be a staple of the meta. This version of the comp uses both the KDA and Spellweaver vertical traits, along with Superfan for a free item on Ahri. The headliner needed is Ahri for the free item, and depending on which version you get, you'll either put in an extra KDA unit or an extra Spellweaver unit. For augments, you want any of the premium AP related augments such as Jeweled Lotus or Magic Wand, or some of the trait specific augments such as the Spellweaver one. Outside of those, any tank related augments for your frontline will work well. Cybernetic Bolt received a light nerf at all tiers, but should still be a good option if combined with a portal that gives extra items such as Loaded Carousel. Itemization, you want either blue buff or Shojin on Ahri, and then Gunblade. As I mentioned earlier, there were some big buffs to items that has made Ahri still playable this patch, and that is a big buff to both Gunblade and Deathcap. Ahri gets a free Deathcap from Superfan, so you don't need to worry about building that. Focus instead on one of the mana generation items and Gunblade. The second unit you should focus on itemizing is one of your tanks, such as Nico or Echo. In the early game, look for a Superfan or Spellweaver start with a good AP item holder such as Annie. With the win streak changes, it doesn't make sense to try and lose streak anymore, and instead you should look to play the strongest board you can make. As this is a 4-cost carry comp, you want to follow the standard leveling pattern of hitting level 8 around 4-2 to 4-5, ensuring you make your interest threshold whenever you can. Going into the mid game, you can either play a 5 Spellweaver or 5 KDA board with Superfan. These boards will give you the easiest transition into your final board and will save you from any complex rolldowns and getting dizzy at level 8. Remember, you'll be seeing your headliner at level 8, so don't get too attached to your current headliner and keep a 1-cost one until level 8. For example, if you get a Spellweaver Annie headliner in the beginning, you should sell it whenever you see a higher cost headliner such as Seraphine or Lulu. Just remember to keep an extra one on the bench for when you sell it. Going into the late game, you want to be hitting level 8 around 4-2 to 4-5 and rolling down for an Ahri headliner. Once you hit, you should look to slot in either KDA or a Spellweaver depending on the headliner version you get, so that you have both 5 Spellweaver and 5 KDA activated. Pivoting options for this comp are any of the 4-cost AP comps this patch, which are either Pentakill Karthus or Disco TF. Ahri's items will fit well on both and should still be strong. You'll just need to spend a little more time on your final board by selling your KDA units for Pentakill or Disco units.
You want style? You found her.
This comp has received pretty much 0 changes from the patch, which means it's still going to be a strong comp to climb with. It's a consistent top 4 comp, which sometimes gets a first if you manage to 3-star at least 3 of the units, but that doesn't happen very often. What has made this comp become even more viable is the fact that Country Emblem is now craftable using a spat and cloak, which was the old Jazz spat, which is now uncraftable. This means that the ceiling for this comp has gotten easier to reach, and if you manage to get a spat on the carousel along with an early country start, then I would look at trying to force this comp, as 5 country will carry through the early to mid stages of the game, and 7 country at level 8 should see you to an easy top 4. I'm not going to get into the entire comp, as I've already covered this twice in my previous top comps guides, and it's unchanged since then. I'll provide a link in the description below to this comp guide with a timestamp to the point I go through it if you want to see that.
Lady Luck is smiling.
And finally, we have yet another classic AP comp that was strong in the very beginning of the set, but then fell off over time. This is the first guide I've done where there are more AP comps than AD. It's definitely going to be an AP heavy meta, and if you get dropped AP items early on, you're going to be spoilt for choice with comps to play at level 8. Disco TF was strong last patch, but only if you high rolled out of your mind and hit early 5 costs such as Ziggs, Sona and Alawi. With this latest patch, they've buffed pretty much every aspect of this composition, including big buffs to Taric, Gragas and TF, the 3 core units. This means you no longer need to high roll to have a stable board, and Disco should be a strong board throughout every stage of the game. Augments you should look out for are of course any AP related augments such as the ones I've mentioned in the Karthus and Ahri comps, but also the Disco related augment and the shock treatment augment. Stationary support also works very well in this comp, as you'll be clumping up your units together anyway for the Disco balls. Itemization for TF should be Shojin, Deathcap, and then you can flex the other item. Red buff used to be the go-to in the 3rd slot, but it has received quite a few nerfs this patch. I'll most likely replace it with Gunblade, which received some buffs. Second unit itemization should be Blitz with any tank items you can make. For the early game, Disco should be fairly easy to hit in the opening stages, as there are 2 1-cost Disco units and 1 2-star one, but you can also play around a Spellweaver start if you get that. Level to 4 at 2-1 and look to use Nami or Annie as your item holder for TF, and add any tank items put on your non-Disco tank until you find Blitz. Going into the mid game, as this is a 4-cost carry comp, you want to use a standard leveling strategy of 6 at 3-2, 7 at 3-5, and 8 between 4-2 and 4-5. By level 7 you should have your core disco lineup and pair that with Spellweavers as your main damage source, or tanks if you're using Nami as your main item holder. Once you hit level 8, you want to sell your current headliner and look for TF as your headliner or Disco Blitz. You want to stay at level 8 until you have a 2-star TF before going 9 for a strong frontline unit such as Alawi, or you can put in Bard for 4 Dazzler if you hit the Disco TF headliner. The pivot option for this comp is Spellweaver Ahri or Pentakill Karthus, with my preference being the Ahri board as it should be easier to transition to. And that's it for this guide. I hope you found it helpful. If you think there are any other comps that should have made it to the list, then let me know in the comments below and I'll see you in the next video.